Alright, I just gotta make sure that everything is going here before I get started. Alright, we're good. Alright, so let me show this blocking thing off, right? Before I actually show it, because I have to switch some code back before I do, let me show you what we currently have for this build. You can see at the top, block action created, right? So the whole idea here is that you have two components, because you have the sprite itself doing the animation, or doing the action of blocking, right? And then you have the shield itself. Now, let me rerun that because this makes sense in the context. So, you see this brand new buckler that I've got in the game, right? So, this is this is like, not, alright, like, I have to be careful of the terminology that I use when developing this, because there is a difference between a sprite group context, which is how I refer to the direction that the sprite is representing, and the number of frames that a particular sprite has for a given context. In general, for the idle animation, for the walking animation, for attacking, for etc., for a hero or a human, each one of those is a different sprite, a different, like, completely different texture, and each texture contains different context, the different directions I was talking about earlier. So, like, for the idle animation, for instance, It's 4 frames for the up left direction, 4 frames for the up right direction, 4 frames for the bottom left, and 4 frames for the bottom right. And this is one sprite. All right, like we label that sprite the idle animation for the human. It's like human idle, and then human walking has 4 directions as well, and then attacking has 4 directions as well. So does blocking. For instance, let's take walk. That's walk down right, which is also left. And then when we, or sorry, right, and when we go left, he changes direction, and now it's the two, this is another context. So when we go up right, that's another context. When we go up left, that's also another context. So for the humanoids and things that have these contexts, we're able to aggregate these sprites together and call it a sprite group. So the sprite group is like representative of one entity, right? Or at least that's how I initially planned it. I should hint at the problem that we're going to face, right? Actually, it's a problem I overcame over the weekend, and I'm really happy because we're going to get this shit rolling and make some really cool stuff. But getting this little nuance worked out first is really important, because I hadn't really thought forward ahead as to how this was going to work at a code level, because when you look at what I'm doing from a top-down view, it makes sense. We have a naked human, but we want to put clothes on him. We want to put a buckler on him. We want to have some way to represent, like, that he's got a weapon somehow. So far, the only way we have this is the attack animation. But wouldn't it be cool if, for instance, during a blocking animation, we had a specific overlay for the buckler after we pick it up? So we could actually pick up the buckler now, and that actually works. That's actually in our inventory now. That shows up, like, right here. I can even prove that, because inventory count is currently 0. When I walk over it and hit W, we pick it up. I don't know that W is always going to be the default. It's like whatever defaults I figure out for myself is probably going to be the default control scheme for the game itself. And one of the key points I'm trying to hold on to moving forward is that I'm trying to make this game from the perspective that I'm back in the 1980s, and that I'm back at the time of my birth, right? But I've gone back in time. I'm 38 years old. I'm going to be 39 in January. I've gone back in time. It's 1986, year of my birth, and that's the year that Super Mario Brothers came out. It's actually 1985 in Japan, 1986 in the United States, and December of 1988, my grandmother gets my parents an Atari 2600. That didn't last long, though. They traded up for an NES. One of the smartest things that my parents have ever done in their lives. Probably the smartest thing they've ever done. But because really critical for my own development to get to this point, right? Super Mario Brothers being the game of my first memory, and largely leading to 2 questions in my mind as a child before I was really able to speak the thoughts into existence. That was, where did this come from, Super Mario Brothers? And how do I make things like it? Now we're there. We're back in 1986 with advanced knowledge of C++, C, Lua, incredible processing power in comparison to the age, and we still want to make a game with a look and feel of that age. But most importantly, we don't want to overcomplicate the input schema. Like, the NES only had a handful of buttons: up, down, left, right, start, select, A and B, right? So I'm trying to limit the number of different keys that you'll be able to press. And in order to maximize the ability for us to have a lot of different things going on, I'm gonna have to make very clever use of the fact that I might only offer 2 buttons. We might try to go something more modern, maybe something on the order of like a Pro Switch controller. Realistically, you're not gonna need direction sticks. The D-pad, definitely important. Maybe we'll go with like 4 face buttons and then like 4 shoulder buttons with a start and select. So 8, 10 inputs besides the arrow keys and the numpad. I think that would be okay, because then you could concentrate the keys on one side of the controller, or the keyboard, and very easily offer right out the gate left and right hand modes. We could even map to like old school NetHack. But one of the big things with roguelikes and games that are kind of in this direction is that for a lot of people, there's many different options that you're able to do when you're actually creating. There's many options when it comes to like the inputs, and sometimes this can be overwhelming. I don't want to overwhelm people with what I'm building, or myself for that matter, because if I end up overwhelming it, I'll never get the game out. And if I don't like fine-tune each individual action as I introduce them and make sure everything works exactly the way that I want it to. So that's what we're going to do right now. What's up? How you doing? All right. So to demonstrate what I was talking about earlier, wait. Let's see. Accidentally hit the wrong button there. All right. So to demonstrate what I was talking about earlier, we have this big code base, and before I get to like cleaning up code, this today I'm going to start off with cleaning up everything I did over the weekend. And once everything's nice and tidy, we can look at what the next steps are going to be. But let's go to key block, right? So this is what I got working. So to start with, we're just gonna have a completely non-functional animation representation of what I got working. Oh, he shouldn't even be doing the thing, because he hasn't. So I haven't written code to like actually acknowledge that you've picked up the shield, or that you're equipped with a shield, into the animation aspect yet. But at the moment, I'm like hard drawing it in there. So imagine that you've picked this fucking buckler up, right? Now you hit block and it performs a block. So imagine we have an enemy, and one of the next things that we're going to do after all this is get the enemy attacking. Imagine that we do a block in preparation for an enemy attack, right? That's because it might end up that, in the future, I introduce some sort of priority system where preemptively blocking would be a good idea because you don't know if you're going to make the attack or not, but blocking might be like priority action or something like that. I don't know. We'll figure it out. So you have a block now, and we have an attack. And obviously the enemy responds to the attack. The attack's non-functional also. We just have like the animation recognizing, because at a small level in the actual Lua code, when you attack, it actually registers the attack. Like that's how we set a flag on the enemy to indicate that it was damaged, and then we use that to choose which animation that we're going to do. So that's what's new, right? But like getting the functional aspect of this rolling. We're doing this kind of thing. So I don't necessarily want to force set the animation from here, right? Or perhaps I do. All right. So that's kind of good too. So this is already a little bit cleaner. Let's see. All right, so I think we're in a good spot to start cleaning because, like I said, we want this to be like a functional block, right? So if the player chooses to block and the enemy chooses to attack, and the enemy's attacking in the direction of the block, then we roll some dice, and if the block is successful, then we need to trigger yet another animation to represent the successful block. But first we have to get the enemies attacking. And before I do that, I just want to warm up and start cleaning things. All right. So what do I mean by cleanup, right? This means a lot of different things. It's my idea of just making sure that we've gotten rid of old code that we've commented out that we know that we're not going to need anymore. I know this because entity animation set pulls a sprite group given the ID, so I don't have to worry about that. One thing that would be nice in the future is be able to like actually determine if the sprite group belongs to a particular entity. I haven't figured out how we should go about that, but right now, like, we're just doing it at a very top level without checking. Yeah, that's old. We pull the hero ID at the top of this function, so we don't need that. All right, so we have a, let's see, start from the bottom. So one thing I need to make consistent here is that create hero Lua should return a const entity ID. So nice. Appreciate that. That's awesome. That's super. I love it when people tell me that. That's so cool to hear. Thank you. That's exactly the vibe I'm going for. Is like, you know, let's all get some shit done. Just chill out. You can't get shit done if you're all stressed. All right, so we should return ID here. So create hero Lua. It's called here. So const hero, const entity ID, hero ID. And this way we can do an error, a nice little error check. Which this is a useful pattern just for like doing some clean stuff. All right, everything's still good. I like to step from the bottom up. So like you see a lot of similar code between these create, like buckler and create orc, right? And a lot of it's general error checking. Like up here, we check to make sure we pass in a game state. We check to make sure that you don't pass in null for the name. If X or Y are less than 0, we want to error out. We want to also make sure that X and Y are not greater than the width of the dungeon or the height. And then we actually go to create an entity. And if this is successful, this returns an entity ID. And if it's successful, then we want to set some parameters on that entity. And then we create the sprite group. The sprite group uses some of the parameters on the entity to determine which sprite that we want to attach to it. This is really the only real way I have of mapping sprites or like entities to like their textures at this moment, but it's working for what I'm doing. Although we don't have that much stuff, eventually we'll have to find a way to do this, more cleanly. But similar patterns, so like we create the sprite group, which we should also check the errors on this too, but create hero Lua, very straightforward also. We set an initial direction, set the race, direction, create sprite groups. Here we initialize our data structures for the game state, which slowly we're going to be relying a lot less on this and using the Lua game state a lot more. But for right now, we use tile type to initialize the dungeon floor. And actually, we don't need this dungeon floor anymore. Now, one thing about this is during shutdown, we have to make sure that we're not freeing the dungeon floor, right? We have to set game state free. So we need to be a lot more explicit here during the free of the game state, because previously when I tried to get rid of the dungeon floor, I began experiencing crashing, and now I know why. It's because we were trying to free the dungeon floor when it was null. If G pointing to dungeon floor, then we can free it. But yeah, so in the very beginning we initialized dungeon floor to be null. So if we never actually create it, we shouldn't crash. Everything builds. Make sure that when we close, it closes safely. So now let's make sure that the hot reload works. Yep. Okay. Very good. So let's keep going up. Create sprite group. So entity XY dungeon with height. We loop through the sprite keys that are attached to the request or to the function call. And for each sprite in the sprite group, we create a sprite, attach it to the sprite group. And we set some meta parameters. I introduced a thing called a specifier in order to properly select between two different versions of a sprite group. Like, for instance, with the buckler, is it on the tile or is it on the player? And because they have the same ID, I realized, oh shit, this actually creates kind of an interesting problem for me to deal with. Because the whole idea of like having the sprite groups together was to aggregate all of the sprites for a particular entity into one group. However, I realized that those sprite groups are only from a particular context. It might be more proper to call it sprite group context, but at the very end, we insert that sprite group into our hash table. So whenever we create an entity, the whole idea is you create the entity first, and then you create the sprite group, and then you add that to the sprite table, and then there's a nice relationship between the entity and what's actually in the graphics table. Set default animation for ID. This should be a const. So should this. Set default animation for all right, so far so good. Let's keep going. See, this is create sprite group ID, and so this is becoming a very nasty function, right? Very nasty. So, like, I know that this works because this code is what enables me to select which sprite we're actually going to render, depending on which context we're in. If it's in the blocking animation, we select guard buckler. If it's on the tile, we just select buckler. I differentiate between them using this thing called a specifier, which at the moment I'm kind of hard coding the names in, but like we have specifier on tile and specifier block just for the shield. There will be cases where I need to use these in the future, so in the future if I need to extend these I will, and hopefully I can make them more generic. The one that we have to get to is block success, which in order to get this working I have to get enemies attacking first, and I also have to get the player damaged, and then we can actually like attempt to block. So it would be like hero block animation followed by enemy attack animation and then block success animation. So there's a plan there, but I have to be very incremental about this, and I want to make sure everything's as clean as I can make it for right now. So you create a human, we do this, and it's very similar pattern for any new entity. So hopefully I can also genericize this a bit, but in large case, I'm probably going to end up having to move things to different files, and maybe not, we'll see. We're not using reload textures at the moment. This is old. I don't think I want to do it this way anymore, so we're just going to get rid of that. The build time was just so bad. Like, I've taken graphs of how bad it was, and it's so much better now. Company scene looks pretty cool, honestly. The code for title scene and company scene's like not all that fantastic, but it does look cool, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of want to show y'all. I'm not gonna lie, that looks sick, right? Uh-oh. Wait. There we go. Oh, that's right. I still, yeah, so I still have space mapped to something else, which is why it's doing what it's doing, but it's also for easy development. That's why I start the scene on the gameplay scene. So one of the things too about like the selecting the like correct uh context for the sprite is that we're actually not selecting the correct context for the shield. It's only showing correctly when we're facing in the bottom right. So we would have to set the context to match the same context based on the direction that the player's facing. So that's an important detail that I have to clean up. Part of me doing these cleanup sessions is that it gives me time to like think about stuff like that. It's important to catch it like before you move on. And I hadn't previously caught that, so I'm glad I did. So like a lot of the action stuff here we could map into different functions just for sake of like making this whole thing smaller. Like for instance, I wrapped a lot of this into handle player input movement key. So here I could do this for attack, for instance, right? Void libgame handle player input attack key. Ubuntu. Nice. I need to give Arch a try sometime. But I used to rock Gentoo back in the day. Alright, so now we should be able to reduce this down to Plasma. Are you using KDE? Nice. I used KDE briefly, and it's very clear to me that either they or macOS ripped off one of the other. KDE gives me very Mac OS vibes in terms of user experience, but it's still good. Like, the guy who actually got me onto Gentoo used KDE, like, and I'm sure he still does. Like, he was rocking it back in like 2006, like maybe, yeah, somewhere around that timeline. Lib game handle player. Um, Pick up. It's not awful, honestly. There's a lot of good things to be said about Mac OS. The one big dislike is the lack of visual customization, and certain aspects of the like UI are like locked in, and they're like not like like you can't change anything about the fact that like every application eats up like a piece of the top of the screen with the fucking menu bar, right? Like, that's just part of the Mac thing. The keyboard shortcuts aren't that different, honestly, but they have like a lot more of them too. And there's really weird things underneath the hood that are built in that, if you know enough about programming in Linux, can be actually kind of interesting to play with, such as like a lot of the automation tasks, the Apple script stuff, etc. The OS like, my biggest beef with Mac OS is how much RAM it eats up. It's so heavy duty. There's like no stripped down lightweight version of Mac OS, and that bothers me. They really kind of force you into this pathway where, in order to get the best experience, you have to have the most money and buy the best stuff. And I really don't like that about their whole paradigm. It's antithetical to like my idea of like good computing philosophy. Well, thank you. Fucking awesome. I appreciate that. That was loud as shit though. I need to I need to turn that down. Um Control audio via OBS. Okay. Hopefully that's not as loud. Um oh wait. It did block. So pickup key. Video froze? Traffic hiccup. All right, let me get back to it. I don't want to get too distracted here. All right, so we need these over into .h just to be proper. Let's see. Yeah, this is a very ugly function too, but this literally, given a representative direction, correctly sets the sprite group to the direction that it needs to be set in. And the reason I have to do it this way is that the asset sheets that I acquired cleverly have 4 sprite groups contexts: up right, up left, down right, and down left. And from this, I translate this back and forth between an 8-directional system, right? But as a result, this is a very ugly function. That's what I was getting at. Like for right, left, up, and down, we have like this big, branching statement that we have to do. And then if it's one of the other directions, it's very straightforward. We just select, we just do a direct mapping like this. I'm gonna have to get some more coffee here in a minute. But it works. That's the important part. Okay, so this is like part of handle input. I do the enemy test placement up here instead of in the handle input player because technically this isn't something that's going to be part of the actual player experience. It's part of testing. We have a function to do a similar translation. Given a x and y, kind of vector, we map that to a direction in our enum. We are also able to do the opposite by getting the direction, like the xy value from that direction. That ended up being kind of a nice convenience, because a lot of the actions that the player is going to be able to take are going to be based off like a certain direction that you're facing, as well as a potential distance that, like for instance, projectile could travel or something like that. Like when we get to like throw items, for instance. Let's see. You see that these two functions are actually wrappers around functions in sprite group, right? So like it's mostly just a way to keep things safe. So we actually go to like grab a sprite group given given these things. Actually, we should make those const. Go down here. right, let's keep going. So the fading is mostly just for scene transitions, which there's not going to be a whole lot of, but it was kind of a fun exercise and just like playing around with very, very basic stuff. A lot of that's centered around how stuff was written in the raylib template. It uses a very similar approach. We just keep track of like an alpha and just adjust it, and then we keep track of like what scene we're on. And depending on which scene we're on, it tells the main draw frame function like which scene we're currently, you know, working with. Like for instance, we'll eventually do item menus and stuff like that. Like you're gonna have to have a way to access your inventory, right? Like it's nice that we can pick stuff up, but so one of the things too from my work over the weekend is that when we pick up a shield now, we're actually equipping it. So we grab a shield that might be a shield, and if it's tested to be a shield, then we actually start working with it. Otherwise, we should actually return false here. So if we have an entity and a shield, then if the entity doesn't have anything equipped for a shield yet, then we go ahead and equip it. But if we do have something equipped, then we won't equip it for right now. However, in the future, when we come back here, we're going to rewrite this area to test to see which shield is stronger, the one you're equipped with or the one that you picked up. And then we'll auto-equip the stronger shield. Eventually, we'll have to figure out a way to handle this where the user can have 2 shields in their inventory and then choose which one's equipped. But being able to select different shields, of course, we're going to have a similar method of rendering the shield on top of the player. Like I was saying earlier about handling the context properly, now I think about it. So here's where we draw the shield now. So if the entity is the player, like if we're drawing the player and we've drawn the main sprite already, and it happens to be the guard animation, then we draw the shield on top of it by selecting the specific specifier for that sprite group. Well, it's really more than one sprite group, but that's besides the point. So we use the buckler ID and the specifier to get the correct sprite group. We update the destination, and then we also need to update the context. Now here's the trick of this function, of what we're doing here. Okay, so let's take a look at sprite groups. Oh, yeah. So it's actually, yeah, that's correct. It's Copilot that messed up. Buckler group. Now, to get the context, now we're gonna have to write something to get the context. Oh, interesting. No member name context. Current context. I kind of want to make a convenience function for this. Okay.
Greetings, this is DNSK live in the mix with libsdl techno session.
Shout outs to DNSK.
001. I want to greet you all. Welcome to
Here, I'll check the chat.
this event. This is the first.
All right, y'all good.
I'm doing a live set on livesets.com. I am usually more acquainted with SoundCloud and hear this and etc.
Let's see if that fixed it, because if it does, I'm getting coffee. No, that's not correct. That's right. We have to,
I want you to know that there is something in the way. Something.
Uh,
Greetings, greetings. This is DNSK live in the mix on live sets, and I want to welcome my first listener actually on this live set, Irie man. We've been through things and stuff, but have we ever DDoSed anyone? I don't think so. I don't do things like that, but I do techno, especially acid and industrial techno, which I will be serving you guys tonight in this first premiere episode of Noise DDoS on livesets.com. So put it together, and I will prevail.
I think this will do it, actually. So actually, instead of doing the context like that, we can do it by direction. Oh, this isn't gonna work. We need to update sprite group by specifier.
Can you feel it coming into you? Just like the great gig in the sky with Pink Floyd, the vocals are magic. Yes. There is no pain. You are receding. Like a distant ship smoke on the horizon.
That's not correct. Oh, we got some errors. Oh, whoops. 2334. 1436. Um, 760.
Yes. The first track has been played, and it was Flavi Predu with Back Underground, and that's
730.
where I belong. DNSK belongs in the house and techno scene in the underground since 1994. So without further ado, I will now feel like I've been presenting myself enough with my style, my stings and ting-tings and
385.
yeah. So without further ado, I will keep you mystified in the techno. Acid and industrial techno will be served tonight, so
And it's compiled.
I will now put away the mic. Enjoy.
Oh no, it's not doing it. Uh-oh. Shit. I need something to like rotate through the contexts. Oh, I think it would be the current that we're actually changing, not the context. How about we try that? Mm. Oh shit. Mm. Yeah, it's not doing anything. Oh yeah. I would have thought this would have did it. Wait. Yeah, it's the current. The buckler group current. Buckler group. See, with the shadows on the player or the orc,
Yes, you just heard Marivo
you see like
with Hex Original Mix. This is the DJ DNSK live in the
we actually have two different texture keys for the idle animation and the shadow animation, right? So it's not the context,
I haven't been around here before, but I
or rather,
invest some time in this side.
it is.
Coming up is Simon Stacks with Caffeine Spider, a brand new song from techno scene. So anyway, let's try this bass out, huh? Yeah. And a 2, 3.
So when we go to create the sprite group for the hero, we have a map. The same thing with the shield. The difference is that there's no shadow on the shield. But when we read all of these into each sprite group, the human keys have the shadows right next to each other. That's why when we go to render the shadow, it's current context plus 1. So when we get the current context on the player, and it's not the directional context, well, it's not the directional context. But when we go to create the sprite group, create the sprite, which is one big sheet. So in the case of the buckler, all we have is the buckler. But then for the guard buckler, we have a front and a back, and at the moment we're only really using the front. So when the player's moving, though, we need to update the sprite group for the direction, right? This should be how the context gets set. Oh, we never updated the sprite group at this point. It's changing it, but to the wrong one. One of the animations for the player's not correct. Upright is causing the player to start facing down right when they're blocking. Which is weird because attack works. I'll have to take a break here in a few. Like, definitely for coffee, but also to take my baby out to go do some business.
Alright, you just heard Back on 2 original mix with V111. Coming up is Orgy. Or if we pronounce it in, or if we say it in Norwegian, it's Örgi. But I'm Swedish, so the Norway is my wingman in the west, though. Alright, shoutouts to Blackened. Go to open up your web browser, and if you have Discord account, go to discord.blackened.net. That is discord.blcknd.net. And join our server. For all means, you're most welcome. And shout outs to no one else but Intedo, my good friend. And kinda like. Enjoy this tune with Protect a Line with Ergi.
Oh, I just realized it's the sprite sheet itself. Check this out. I'm gonna have to report this to the guy who did the Patreon. Here, I'll show y'all. So check this out. This one should actually be top right, but it's actually bottom right. So I have to fix this. And it should be pretty straightforward, I think. So I guess I gotta change the order of these. Let's see. I thought there was a bug in my code, but it was actually the sprite. Check it out. So the old one was like this, and I just fixed it because it was it did not have the right context. Now, speaking of the correct contexts, I also don't believe this is correct. So I go over here. See, that's not right. So remember, we have this back guard. So realistically, it's going to be a similar thing here. So the whole idea is that this is supposed to be the back layer that you draw first, then you draw this layer, and then you, or rather this layer, and then you draw this layer. But so the leftmost is correct there. So like, oops. Let's see. All right, so this layer goes in between these two, right? So at the very bottom, we would have this. Now you see the bottom one's correct. The second from the bottom's not correct. And I believe, let's see. So for this layer, we would take this, but the second from the bottom's not correct. Just like with this layer, we're missing some of the bottom stuff. So
Alright, in the break beats, we can tell you that this is New Frames with Byronic Hero.
So the one over here would go over here. Alright, that looks correct. Because then now we've got the two sides correct. And what would be drawn on top would be this if it were correct. So we'd actually get rid of this too.
Anyway, that was New Frames with Byronic Hero here on indiedev with your host with the most, DNS.
Now that's correct. That's 100% correct.
Also Ruckus.
So,
To welcome.
oops, we don't want to paste it on that layer.
I want to welcome you. Found me to the Discord server. Just found.
That's correct.
We found you. Have you found us?
Alright, so we're saving that one.
Oh yeah. Anyway, coming up is DIY with React.
Now this would be the back. No. This one. All right. Now this one. Now we're back to normal. Or rather, it's fixed. Yo, Zebus, yeah. Oh, I don't know exactly. Whatever the latest one is. Shit. What was I doing? Alright, we're gonna redraw the sprite again for the buckler. Hopefully we made a little progress here. If not, I'm taking a fucking break. Hmm. Ah, fuck, it's not working.
Yeah, some of that DIYU with Reactor. Anyway, how do you feel that backspin? Do you feel that backspin? Next up is 0055 Ray with Fantasy. Let's put the bass somewhere in like there. Alright, shout outs to LRH Spoon, especially Spoon, who made some spam for my account. Thank you, Spoon.
Weird. Setting the context. It's not the current that needs to change. But the source. Okay. Okay, that works. That works. Perfect. Fuck. Player direction not being updated? No? Player directions being updated? The directions... I mean, it's updating the direction, clearly. But it needs to be an int. It was setting correctly for down left.
Yes, yes.
Something's weird happening in between here and here.
5 ray with fantasy. I feel like I'm one with the cosmos. Anyway, here I am. I techno you like a hurricane. Next up is a real banger. It's Mayo JKS with Triangulation Hill. You maybe know this one? Yeah, it came out this year as well. Very nice ending of the year with some tracks, hits from the scene. This though is Jawbreaker's live version, and it's kind of interesting concept here. It's a lot of breaks and stuff. So anyway, let's get in there. Let's get in there. Big shout outs to Hector, Belly, and Philip on Cypher.
Oh, it's probably because I don't know. Maybe it's because it's not, or I wasn't. Hmm. It's not rendering correctly for upright.
Alright, we have an announcement.
Well, that's because we don't have the. Oh yeah, we don't have
We have an announcement.
the bottom layer of the animation in yet. Of course. Okay.
Big shout outs to Waffle.
That's probably why this isn't looking correct, but it should be updating itself
I guess it's his Ritalin.
correctly
It's his Ritalin he took.
based off the direction.
Some CNS stimulants, yeah. So big shout outs to Waffle for taking drugs. At least Ritalin, if that counts as drugs.
What's really weird is that it works correctly in the very beginning. But something is happening that's causing the context to get reset. Is if I force update the context switch here, oh fuck, I've been on for 2 hours already. I need a mental checkpoint. Now, I'm setting it to down right in the very beginning. So doing this shouldn't break anything, in theory. But it is.
Alright, another shout out to Neo Blaze, who says in Blackened IRC, quote, "Oh yeah, been a long time since I heard music.
You can see this.
Great stuff. And I said, lovely.
So this runs for the length of the animation. It is not many frames. But it's not the correct animation. Oh. It's because we're setting it to none. No, wait, no. No, that's not right. Never mind. No, we were setting it with a specifier of none. It's fine.
Oops, we lost control. I don't think so.
These could get collapsed down. Okay, it's setting correctly there. I don't know why it's getting broken in the when I do it down there, but we got it working. Alright, well this is a good place to actually checkpoint things. Look at all that code.
Yeah. Mayo, JKS, Triangulation Hill, Jawbreakers live version. You just heard that song. This is the NSK Live with Noise DDoS. It's the Techno Session 0001 on livesets.com. This is the first set I do, except that test recording I did earlier today, but now this is
Alright.
totally insane.
That's it for today, everyone. Thanks for joining. Until next time, we got a lot more work to do, but we're making progress. Take it easy.